Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of Carla and Brad Talk About Krautrock.
Hard on the heels of our last one, right? Doing that live episode. Not a live episode. An episode about a live show.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
We're right back in the mix.
Yeah, here we are. We've been waiting for a while to talk about this one, so it's good that we're finally recording it. Took a minute.
Yeah. It's more times to have to go back and listen to the album again and again,
That's
which
right.
I'm not going to complain about because I like this so much.
Yep. Same. We'd love it if you would rate us, review us, share the podcast when we get 5 stars and get reviews and all those fun things. It just helps get the podcast out to more people. We have a Twitter handle, which I don't even know why we share it because we never tweet on it. But it is at CB Krautrock. Maybe one day. If it still exists.
You can talk to us and then maybe we'll answer you. Yeah. We might do a little good cop, bad cop thing because Carla very politely asked that you rate and review us. It doesn't seem like you guys are rating and reviewing us very much lately. So I look at our numbers. We seem to have great numbers. Lots of new people. The number of ratings stays the same. We love to get reviews. It's really helpful to hear how we're doing, what you guys all think. And we do see that you're out there, a decent number of you.
It's great. We love it.
Get on the stick.
Thank you for listening.
Shakes fist.
All right. What have we bought recently on vinyl? Let's do it. It's our vinyl segment.
So kind of a fair amount of stuff built up since our La Dusseldorf episode for me. We talked about some of the stuff I bought in England on the last episode, but I got my copy of Yeti, which I'm so excited about. It is a 2021 release. It comes with a balloon, an dual balloon, a deflated balloon, and a door hanger that says, "Caution, mind-altering music. Enter at your own risk."
Well, I think that's what you should have to let your family know that we are on air. That's what you should hang out on your doorknob.
That's right. We were just trying to figure out how to keep the kids from barging in to sharpen pencils and pick up stuff off the printer. And lacking an on-air sign, maybe that's it. I'll put the dual door hanger on. Awesome. So what else? I got a copy of More Specials a while ago. I got a gatefold double album of the psychedelic sounds of the 13th floor elevators. Still trying to decide what I think about that. The 1001 Album Club folks, they covered this years ago. It was in the 60s. Not in the 60s when they did it, but when they were working.
It probably
through the 60s.
Feels like the 60s to them.
There's an electrified jug. You know how like in the South you'd like play the jug? They somehow found a way to like have an electric jug. And it's so freaking distracting away from the rest of the music.
I haven't listened to that at all.
So anyway, I also got the Damned's first album, Damned, which is terrific. SF Sorrow by the Pretty Things. I sent you a song that I'm completely consumed by, and you were like, nah, don't like it.
Oh, that's right.
Old Man Going by the Pretty Things. Not your thing.
It wasn't my thing.
Yeah. And then the other day, the record store in Watertown, Wanna Hear It Records, moved to another site. So I went to check it out because now they have room for you to flip through the stacks. It's not cramped full, you know? And they're like, yeah, we got a bunch of stuff in the basement that we can't even bother to catalog. It's just so much of it. But go down there and bring up stuff and we'll price it for you. So I go down there. I find Cheap Thrills by Big Brother and the Holding Company, OMD's Junk Culture, Surrealistic Pillow, Forever Young by Alphaville. And I got this gorgeous 1978 copy of Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. I mean, that's
the score.
Spotless. Very, very cool. I need to go back down to that basement. People just coming at them with wheelbarrows and dropping off records because they don't even know what they have.
That's awesome.
How about you?
Well, we were in Italy back in October, and I did pretty well. I found a great copy of La Dusseldorf, this self-titled album. It's a beautiful copy that I just randomly found in the store that was actually more of like an apothecary. And they just had this little
really?
section of vinyl like off to the side, and there was a La Dusseldorf record. And I've subsequently gone onto his Discogs, and he actually has quite a few good things. So I might order some more stuff from him.
So he just like rolls out little chunks of it?
I guess so. I mean, it was really only like a couple like racks, and I thought I'm never going to find anything in here, but I'll just flip through it amongst the oils and bath bombs and other things that were like over on the other side. It was great.
That's awesome. That's a great record.
I picked up a copy of Frank Zappa Hot Rats, which I had been looking for, and I keep trying to get you and the other Mixtape Diaries guys really into this album, and none of you are having it. But I love it so much.
I'll take my SF Sorrow, and you can take your Frank Zappa.
And I'll take my Hot Rats.
Yep.
And then I got a great copy of Pink Floyd's Saucerful of Secrets at this record store called Disco Doro.
Nice.
And this is in Bologna, and I had mentioned it in the Krautrock Facebook group, and someone from Bologna had commented back that that was a good place to get music. And they did have a pretty big Krautrock section. I had a lot of records pulled, but many of them were reissues, so they were the same prices I could get them here. So I ended up just getting the Pink Floyd record, but yeah, it was good. Other than that, Don was talking to me about how we didn't have enough Christmas albums, so I went straight to the record store. I was like, challenge accepted.
Nice.
And I did get a reissue of the Charlie Brown Christmas because I didn't have that, the Vince Guaraldi Trio album. It's so great. And then the best find I got was Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass Band Christmas album. I mean, it sounds a little bit like game show music because he did score a lot of game shows back in the 70s and 80s, but it's fun. It's like a fun little Christmas record. I got a couple other ones too, but they ended up being bad copies of things, but they were $2, so it doesn't really matter. But
I've asked for a copy of Phil Spector's Christmas gift album, and there's a record-shaped wrapped present under the tree that I think came from my daughter, and I think is that record, so I'll know soon enough.
That's right. That same record store had Bad Religion's Christmas record last year, but I didn't get it. And now I kind of wish I would have, because now I can't find it, and it is kind of fun and like a punk rock version of a Christmas album.
I have "O Come All Ye Faithful" on my playlist.
Yeah,
but there's a whole album.
The whole album.
The rest of the album. That's good stuff.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today? What was your pick?
Yeah, so it is my pick. We've done Neu, we've done Cluster, we've done La Dusseldorf. What are we missing, Carla?
Sounds like Harmonia.
It is indeed Harmonia. We're going to do the second LP, 1975's Deluxe. Oh, man, I love this record.
It is so good.
I just adore it.
It's really good. I love it.
Yeah. I've got a copy of it sitting right here on the turntable, but we're going to talk about it. We're not going to play it right now.
I don't have it on vinyl yet, but we'll see.
I think I know where a copy is.
And I think I might be going there in a few weeks.
Nice. So this will close the loop on the Kraftwerk Neu Dusseldorf tree, whatever we want to call it. Maybe. I mean, there's always Cluster and Eno, and I think that counts as a new and different artist.
Yeah. I wish I would have bought that first Cluster and Eno record, though. They did have that at Disco Doro. But it was a reissue, and I still was kind of like, I'd rather have an original copy if I can find one.
Yeah, I saw one in London, too. We, at some point, should talk about whether we'll go back and hit some of these same bands. Like, I can see us going back and saying, all right, we did one Neu album, let's do the other two. We did one Faust album. Let's blitz through three others.
We only did one Can record.
Yeah, right. Speaking up for Can.
Always.
Do a new thing. Always. So, fair to describe Harmonia, I think, as a supergroup.
What do we think about supergroups? Should we be worried?
I like that one Asia song. Didn't really get into electronic. Remember when they came out? I was so jazzed.
We were so excited. We all were excited.
Johnny Marr, Neil Tennant, Bernard Sumner. Yeah, flat.
The fun fact about electronic, though, is that Karl Bartos is credited as the percussion, vocals, and synths in 95, but this was the same Karl Bartos who was in Kraftwerk from 1975 to 1991.
So more of a supergroup than even we thought, electronic.
Yeah.
But if the band's going to be called electronic, it should have someone from Kraftwerk in it. I think that's fair. I mean, we kind of hit a supergroup with that Tangerine Dream record, but it's almost as though it was the supergroup that came before all the other groups.
Yeah, it's
right?
True. Yeah. I don't know that we could call it that.
It gave birth to like what? Cluster, Ashra Temple, everything Klaus Schultze ever did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in this case, this is a supergroup greater than the sum of its parts, which maybe isn't always true, right?
Yeah, and I think that they were maybe more influential in the birth of other genres that we see coming down the road, and they maybe don't get the credit that they're due for that.
Important people cite them, even if they're not widely known. They don't stand out in the pantheon of krautrock acts, right?
Yeah. Brian Eno once said that Harmonia was the world's most important rock group, and I think that's a very strong statement. Especially coming from him.
Yeah, right. I think a reasonable person to opine on such a thing.
Right. We talked a little bit about Harmonia in our Noi 2 episode and then also in our Cluster episode. So if you want the full and complete story of those bands, you'll want to listen to those episodes. You might also want to listen to our Kraftwerk episode and even Le Dusseldorf, because all these artists are kind of all intersecting with one another at this point. We'll still do a deep dive here, but there's a lot more information in some of those other episodes.
Right. So tying all these things together, and the reason why we're telling you those episodes are relevant, in addition to just driving up our hit counts, right, is that...
It's a shameless plug, always.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just because we feel awkward repeating ourselves too much. So
True.
Lots of good stuff in those episodes, but we're going to hit some of the good points here too. Harmonia is comprised, right, of Michael Rother, formerly of Noi, and Hans-Joachim Roedelius and Dieter Moebius of Cluster, right? So Cluster actually stayed together through Harmonia and came out the other side as well.
Mm-hmm. There is still some iteration of Cluster today. Is that right?
It seems like it. Yeah. I mean, it would just be Roedelius, I think, at this point. And I think Apple Music may have some things confused because...
That's what I wondered.
I played something the other day that told me it was Cluster. It sounded a lot like hip hop to me.
Yeah. Regardless, from where we're sitting, Harmonia is very much a convergence of the concepts of both Noi and Cluster.
Yeah, I think it really kind of depends on your starting point, how you might want to think about this, right? You could say that Harmonious is Cluster augmented with Rother's signature guitar sound with a little bit of motoric thrown in from time to time to kind of tie things together. Or you could say it's Noi with Cluster's seminal synth work elbowing into the frame. Biting big chunks out of the structure, warping, distorting things a little bit, stretching the mix. I guess it depends on your perspective. Maybe it's just equal parts one and the other. But they really do, I think, support each other and create something new and distinct. Maybe from time to time, I think, I'm seeing this in some of your notes, and maybe I see it too, is there from time to time I'm thinking, yeah, this kind of sounds a lot like Cluster.
Yeah.
But then not always. Then there are other times where it really does kind of leap into a different frame and do something entirely different.
I think the Cluster influence is really very strong.
It might just be that they're two of the three.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Boil it down very simply.
Right. They have 2 votes.
So All Music had a list of artist moods adjectives for Harmonia.
Yeah, these are fun.
And so their adjectives for Harmonia were motoric, cerebral, pastoral, trippy, atmospheric, flowing, playful, pulsing, shimmering, warm, autumnal, detached, improvisatory. Can I say that word? I can't even say that word.
Right to me.
Is it a word?
Improvisational, maybe. I don't know.
Anyway.
Let's see.
Sprawling, calm, and peaceful.
So now you know exactly what they sound like, right? You can hear it in your head with all those adjectives. Yeah, I saw autumnal and I was curious, I don't know what autumnal sounds like. So I just looked to see who else had that designation. You can click a link and it'll take you there on All Music. Portishead's Dummy album is autumnal. I don't know if you'd have thought that, Carla, but I'm on board with that. Neil Young's Harvest album, I guess because it's called Harvest.
That feels lazy.
It's autumnal. Yeah, also, doesn't seem like Neil Young and Harmonia have a whole lot in common.
No.
Which is why I like Harmonia, in part. Rubber Soul, Astral Weeks, In My Tribe by 10,000 Maniacs. All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll take that mood. So how did we get to Harmonia? Maybe we should talk first about Michael Rother and probably give a little more airtime to him because we didn't really dig deep into where he came from when we did the Noi episode. We were still kind of figuring out how we were going to do these. Of course, we spent a whole episode talking about him last time around.
Yeah.
But that's the 2022 Michael Rother. So where did he come from, right? He's a pretty open guy, gives a ton of interviews. So there are a lot of resources out there to read about his perspectives on music and where he came from, where his sensibilities came from. that's always interesting and fun to tap into. And we'd urge you guys just type Michael Rother an interview into the internet, and you could spend a few hours just reading through it.
A lot will come up. It is nice that he gives so many interviews. Just nice to get a perspective of the time frame too from someone who actually lived in it.
Yeah, and really wants to share it with people, right? Almost like an ambassador across the generations to talk about Krautrock, which is useful, really useful for folks like us who showed up a year and a half ago and are like, explain.
So Rother grew up mainly in Munich in England and in Pakistan. So his father worked for Lufthansa. So they moved from Hamburg to Wilmslow in England. Then his dad ended up overseeing the Far East route in both West and East Pakistan. And so this was in 1960. So they ended up living in Pakistan when Rother was 9 to 12 years old. And actually, they spent a little bit of time in the David Stubbs Future Days book talking about this. And Rother commented on how fascinated he was by the sounds of Pakistani music and by how it seemed to go on like an endless stream of melody and rhythm like a river. And that water theme really carries through in all of his music. And I think we've end up talking about that on every record that he's on. We comment about the water and the river stream theme. He was quoted as saying, "I've always had a soft spot since then for Indian and Pakistani music. It's the music I play to soothe the nerves and find inner balance."
That's really interesting because I don't know that I hear that in his own music. I don't hear that influence or that world music sound in what he does. But I definitely hear the concept of the endless stream of melody and rhythm, right? That's Hallo Gallo. That's for Immer, right?
Yeah.
Pushing forward, moving.
For sure. Sometimes, and we'll talk about it when we get into the song by song, but I mean, I think there's one song in particular on here that to me had the most Eastern influence worked in there a little bit. I hear it from time to time.
Now that you say that, I think I know where you're heading, but we'll
save that.
We'll get to it in a minute.
His mom was a classically trained piano player, but she never played music professionally. This would have been in the 30s and 40s. So she worked an office job to help support the family. And then ultimately Rother's father died when he was 15. So I think his mom never played professionally because then she was a single mother working to support the family. He ended up joining an Anglo-American style rock band called Spirits of Sound. Wolfgang Flür was actually a part of that group and subsequently joined Kraftwerk's classic lineup.
I feel like I've seen video of them.
I think we've seen video of them recently.
Something. I don't know if it's on YouTube. Black and white stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember where. Not anything you would expect would lead to where we've landed here. It's a long road. And of course, from Spirits of Sound, Rother played guitar briefly in an early iteration of Kraftwerk, invited by, I think it was Florian Schneider, to sit in on a session, and then ultimately came back. He was in a lineup that had Dinger on drums and Florian Schneider on flute and synths, with Ralf Hutter taking a break, maybe going back to school. Don't have a lot of clarity on why he wasn't involved, but they made a run at recording an album together, and there's great footage on YouTube of Rother, Dinger, and Schneider. They're on German TV. It's that Rückstoß Gondoliere. I don't know what that is. I know that's the name of the show, if that's what they were calling the composition. Very, very cool sounds there. Not obviously Neu, not obviously what Kraftwerk would become. Very distinctive on its own and very cool. But they couldn't hold it together in the studio. Rother actually met the cluster guys early on in 1971 while he was still with Krautrock. As it turns out, they played a show together in Hamburg. Rother told the Quietus he'd been invited to name his 13 favorite albums of all time, and he listed Cluster 2 as one of those. And in that context, he was telling the story of how he played a gig with them. And here's what he said. We were the main act and they were support. We were very democratic and asked them who they wanted to start. They decided, you start. They wanted to take it easy. That was a big mistake. Klaus Dinger, Florian Schneider, and I, we wrecked the place. When we said it's time for the next band, people didn't want us to stop. And ultimately, people came rushing to the stage and started disconnecting the speakers. Rother tells stories from around this time of Dinger playing so hard that he was bleeding out of his hands and arms, right?
Yeah.
And then Rother turns around, looks at that, and is like, okay, I need to be as committed as he is.
Well, then it's at this point that Rother and Dinger come together to form Neu. In an interview with The Wire, Rother said, Klaus and I agreed on most things musically, so it was quite normal that we go together. In the end, it was clear at one certain moment that we didn't want to continue. I remember it a little bit different from Klaus. There was a lot of arguing and psychological warfare going on. There were extreme personalities, Klaus and I and Florian, apart from maybe having different opinions of the direction the music should take. Apart from Florian, maybe he had the idea he was a minority with us, and we were taking his name, Kraftwerk, in a direction that wasn't his.
Right, so this is the three's a crowd moment where Florian was the odd man out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which says something because as time will go on, and we talk about this in our Neu episode, the Dinger-Rother thing was imperfect.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
Rother likes to talk about how they had a synchronicity musically, right?
Yeah.
They had a shared sense of what they wanted to do, but that in pretty much every other respect, they were too different for this partnership to sustain itself. But we got 3 terrific albums out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have no complaints. Albums, of course, are Neu 1972, 71, 72.
72.
The 50th anniversary was this year, yeah. Neu 2, 73, and then Neu 75, right? And Neu 75 actually issued after Rother went off to form Harmonia and get those 2 albums out. Fair question, I guess. Did Deluxe come out before Neu 75? They both came out in 75.
Yeah, I think the Harmonia record might have come out first.
August 2075, Deluxe came out. It says here that Neu 75 was recorded between December 74 and January 75. So I guess the sequence was, Musik von Harmonia, Neu 75, Deluxe.
Actually, that makes sense because the first Harmonia record came out. They were still kind of in that legal issue. They finished the first Harmonia record, right? And then they knew that they had to come back to fulfill their obligation to the record company with Neu to record that third record. Right. So I guess that would have happened in between the 2 Harmonia records.
And to their credit, they could have just spun anything out, but we got Neu 75 and
it's pretty good.
I think they nailed it. Yeah. But regarding Harmonia, Rother says after they did the Neu 2 record, and this was, we talk about this in our Neu 2 episode, right? This was a little, I don't know if you'd call it a train wreck. Maybe you would. They burned through all their money and most of their studio time recording just a couple of tracks. Mm-hmm. And so what they ended up having to do was take their pre-existing single, Neu Schnee, Super, those 2 tracks, put them on the album, speed them up, slow them down, make extra tracks out of it, mess around with tape, and really just fill out the rest of the album with some really experimental, you would argue early concept remix type stuff just to get enough to put down on the record. So after that experience, Rother says He told The Wire, I had the feeling that my development had come to a halt. I had the idea that the next step had to come. I wasn't sure how to do that. With Klaus, I thought it was not going to work. In a way, there was quite some desperation. For me, I hear it on that second album. And again, if you want more about Noi 2 and what was going on there, check out our Noi 2 episode. So that's the question, right? What brought Rother to Cluster's door, right? He was trying to put together a UK tour for Noi, right? He was trying to take these heavily produced, heavily engineered albums and come up with something that he could turn into a live show.
Yeah.
Same article with The Wire, he says, look, we had to find a way to do it on stage. I had heard the first or second Cluster album. Im Süden, that title, I had heard it. You know, there was a guitar in Im Süden. Maybe these people could help Noi. So I went to visit Hans-Joachim and Dieter in the countryside and took my guitar along, and I jammed with Roedelius, and I had the same feeling. This is it with Roedelius. This is what really inspired me, so I just dropped Noi. I couldn't continue at that point, and 4 weeks later I moved to this place and we did Harmonia. Maybe we could take a second and talk about Im Süden. I freaking love that song.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah. That's a long track. This is on Cluster 2. Mm-hmm. We enthuse about it a fair bit on our Cluster episode, but it's not on the track by track because we talked about another Cluster album, Zuckerzeit. This is a good 12 minutes, something like that.
To me, the thing that really struck me about that track is how out of time it is. Like, it sounds as fresh now, like a modern rock song, as a 70s song. I mean, I don't think you would peg that as being like a 70s era song.
Yeah, it has that same quality that a lot of the longer Noi tracks do for Immer or Halagallo, where it weaves in maybe 2 or 3 different themes, overlays them over top of each other, runs effects through them, stretches the whole track out to like 10 minutes or more, and it never gets boring. You're never checking your watch. You're never ready for the next track necessarily. You're hearing that same kind of guitar lick over and over and over again, and I'm fine with it. Like, put on a repeat as far as I'm concerned. So maybe he heard that song and felt, yeah, this is on all fours with what I'm doing with Halagallo. Maybe we have a beat, and Cluster doesn't have a beat, but similar sensibilities, similar ideas about how to structure a song.
Yeah.
More than once in these interviews, he's referenced that very track, Im Süden. I heard Im Süden, and I went to find these guys. I think we talked also about how Cluster, the thing about Cluster is they go and sit in the country, and people come to them.
Yes.
They're badasses. As a side note, Rother, going on in this interview with The Wire, says that around the same time, Klaus, quote, joined forces with his brother and some other guy. The other guy was Hans Lampa, who I saw playing the drums for Michael Rother a month ago.
So funny.
He gave this interview before he ultimately hired that other guy to be his touring drummer, and they are great together. Just a little brief excursion there.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting note. And I think that, you know, as we kind of talk a little more about Moebius and Roedelius, Rother told Clash in 2020, you know, Noi was mildly successful, but Harmonia was really rejected. The reception of the audience was total ignorance. He said, we had some really difficult times financially, but artistically, it was a great period for me. I totally enjoyed working with Roedelius and Moebius.
It makes a little bit of sense because Noi had guitar and drums. And that's just enough for people to grab onto.
I think because creatively they felt like they were really in sync, that they're like, this is the secret sauce. Like, we've both had some mild success with Cluster and Noi probably having more success of the two groups. So I just wonder if they felt like now we're bringing all of our best elements together in a way. Like, surely this is going to work. And then it kind of fell flat in their minds.
Yeah. I think it's reasonable for a cluster to think, hey, we can make some money here, right? Because I feel like cluster is much less accessible than Neu. Like our pathway to cluster was we listened to Neu.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we get deep. Then we were like, all right, we want to dig deeper into Krautrock. I'd be surprised if people started with cluster and found their way to Neu. So, right, if you're taking something that's kind of splitting the difference in terms of what's experimental and what isn't, if the cluster guys are thinking, all right, let's see what we can get here, right? We can make this a separate and distinct side project. We're not selling out our values necessarily, but we're edging in the direction of being more commercial. Maybe just not far enough. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know how you listen to Deluxe and not fall in love with it. And I don't know why DJs wouldn't be playing it on the radio all of the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
But let's talk about Moebius and Roedelius. So these two go way back to their time in Berlin. Roedelius had a hardscrabble childhood in East Germany and ultimately defected into West Berlin. Moebius was born in Switzerland, was an art student and restaurant chef in Berlin when Roedelius arrived.
Yeah, and Roedelius and Moebius were ultimately attracted to the Zodiac Free Arts Lab studio and performance space, which actually Roedelius was a co-founder of with Konrad Schnitzler. And both Schnitzler and Moebius followed, we talk about Joseph Beuys in practically every episode. And
right.
Schnitzler and Moebius were kind of students of Beuys and his Fluxus movement. So then ultimately the three of them ended up forming Cluster with a K in 1969. And also we talked in some detail about the Zodiac Free Arts Lab in the Cluster episode. So I know we've kind of done a deep dive on that in a previous episode. They performed extensively around Berlin at art exhibitions. And the funny thing, the story cracks me up every time I look at it, that a priest heard them playing. Yeah. So a priest hears Cluster playing and agrees to fund 2 Connie Plank produced studio recordings as long as they overlay religious themed lyrics over them. And those are the first 2 Cluster with a K records. It's crazy.
I'm going to reach the kids with these guys, right? I'm going to turn all kinds of people toward Catholicism because they love Cluster.
They love this experimental art rock.
It's like the Reese's ad, right? You've got the peanut butter, I've got the chocolate.
Right. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. And that they're Connie Plank produced. Like, it's just every time we talk about that, it floors me.
Infolge Nichtbenutzung des Gedächtnisses, zwecks Wiederholung des Gehabt. Diesseits der Mauer, gegenüber Hiroshima, nicht schlecht.
Right, so this is like aggressive, experimental, confrontational.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's sort of the German equivalent of the hippie happenings that we had in California, right? But it's all tied in with art. You're not shearing off music from art. They're all rolled in together. They're all, adopting similar theories and attitudes about how to express themselves. And Schnitzler was probably the most hardcore of the 3, fair to say, right?
Yeah,
most
sure.
aggro avant-garde. Yeah. Which is saying something, I think, right? And eventually, Roedelius and Moebius move on away from Schnitzler to form C Cluster, capital C Cluster. And so you have that first Cluster 71 record, Cluster 2 with Imsuden on it. And then from there, Michael Rother gets involved. Actually, was he the sound engineer? Did he produce Zuckerzeit?
I think he produced it. We may need to fact check that real quick, but...
Or just go back to our Zuckerzeit episode where we're probably right there.
So you can probably hear me clicking on the keys.
It's in our notes.
Yeah.
It's only in boldface underlined type in our notes.
It's late.
Yeah.
It's late at night.
I'm just going to read the note.
Do it.
Much, much more about Cluster K and Cluster C in our Cluster Zuckerzeit episode where we give extensive discussion to Cluster's 3rd LP, which Michael Rother produced. There you go. All right. So we brought these 3 together. How do we get Harmonia out of it?
Yeah, so Cluster at this point is now decamped to an estate in the countryside that was provided to them free of charge by the government as long as Roedelius and Moebius committed to rebuilding the broken down structures on the land. And apparently it was quite run down. I mean, they were running electricity and they needed water. I mean, all like basic things.
Right. We're going to run some clips in this episode. Rother himself did an interview with Red Bull Video, and the Cluster guys did too. Here's a clip from Roedelius in the Red Bull interview, talking about the estate in Forst that they had fixed up.
This time we were based in a very beautiful place in the middle of Germany, beside a river, which is called Alter Weserhof in Forst. And it was a very...
It's a house of the Middle Age.
Utopia.
You guys bought a house there?
We didn't buy a house. We were able to live in that house. We had to build it. We had to
The
repair
government
it.
gave it to us because it's a house that historically protected by government. You are not allowed to tear it down, but it was just rotten. So we got it to, and we had to fix it.
And so Michael Rother comes there and grabs
He
a
came
saw.
there and he loved the place, of course. And
He came when it already was fixed.
And he came after it was fixed, is what you're saying.
he found the perfect situation. So he liked to play with us, and we played once. We made a concert in one of these big houses, and it worked out well. And so we decided to found Harmonia beside Cluster.
So he kind of Riley notes that after it was fixed, Rother showed up.
Yes.
After we put in all the work, right?
Right.
And started just broadcasting incredible music into the outer world, he shows up.
If you build it, he will come.
And indeed, in an interview with Psychedelic Baby magazine, Dieter Moebius was asked, "What can you tell us about Harmonia?" And he simply says, Michael Rother joined Cluster. That's where he leaves it.
Okay. Clears it up.
So, yeah, someone's strutting. We were the cool kids. He wanted to hang with us.
Roedelius said something similar to the Psychedelic Baby Gang. He said, we haven't been at all after all the guys who finally did some work with us. They came in to meet us, interested by what we did at the time. We didn't join Neu. We worked with Rother from Neu, who came to meet us in Forst to ask whether we would like to work with him. So...
And as they told Red Bull Music just one last time, after Neu split, Michael Rother came to our place and wanted to join our group. So maybe that's the thing, right? So they weren't going to let him in. He wasn't going to join Cluster.
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
they did want to work with him. And so they had to have, we see this later with the Eno stuff too,
Yeah.
right? They had to have another name for it.
So as they were deciding what to name this group, in future days, David Stubbs says that the name is an amalgam of harmony and ammonia. But on the Harmonia website, Roedelius says few people know that the name Harmonia was initially a joke. In Germany, it's popular to call a choir Harmonia, something like Harmonia Düsseldorf. We found this signpost in the cellar saying Harmonia Otenstein, a place near Forst, so we chose that name. That was a joke from the beginning, and hardly anyone gets that joke.
Yeah, I'm not sure I get it now. Stick to music. It's the stand-up, Roedelius.
When I read the line in future days, I was like, okay, that makes sense. I got it. There's ammonia bottle on Music von Harmonia, right? Like, okay, I can get there. And then a few weeks later, I'm reading the Harmonia website, and there's that. So,
Right.
I don't know.
I've seen this a few
We've
times.
seen it a lot.
Right? Like, is far and far and far on the Autobahn? Is it fun, fun? Is it not?
Yeah. I guess it's just all up to interpretation. So.
Yeah. Interesting. So you just mentioned Musik von Harmonia, right? That's the first album. We have some pretty good clips here from the various Red Bull interviews about how that was put together. Here's Dieter Moebius.
So whose idea was it to program the drum machine like that?
I don't know who played the drum machine. Did you play the drum machine maybe?
Could be. It was still the same drum machine, kind of drum machine, and this is going out of the drum machine, going in a tremolo effect.
Tremolo effect. pedal.
So it makes the normal rhythm. It cuts it in a different way than the real rhythm goes. So it makes it whole
Much
different.
more interesting.
We talked a little bit about this on Zuckerzeit. It's a similar thing, right? They were taking one of these drum machines that you use for dance classes and running effects through them.
Yeah.
Here's Michael Rother elaborating.
We ran the sound of the drum machine through different small. We didn't have a sophisticated gear, of course, but we were poor musicians. Very simple gear, but for instance, a delay, and then very important was a Schaller tremolo. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of that. It was used in the late 50s, 60s by guitar players to do blang. Anyway, I'm not a technician, so I cannot really explain, but it changes the amplitude so the sound disappears and then it comes up again, and depending on the speed, you could change the speed of that tremolo, and if you found the sweet spot where it connected to the delay and the beat, the tempo of the beat, and of course the wah-wah pedal, and at other occasions we also used fuzz boxes. So everything that chopped up the original silly sound was just welcome. And in that case, it was the tremolo with, I guess, with the wah-wah pedal and the delay.
I really like this album, but to me, it's just an extension of Zuckerzeit. I don't think you can hear Rother's influence as strongly on Musik von Harmonia versus Deluxe.
Yeah, I was attracted to it. I'll put the cards on the table. The cover art grabs you.
Oh, yeah.
And as between this and Deluxe, I'm like, oh, well, I got to listen to this one. I actually found a copy of it at Newberry Comics, just floating in the racks. Brain has put out reissues of both these albums. And I don't know, I've walked into stores and found them. It's been pretty cool.
Yeah.
So of course I grabbed it. I play it. I haven't spent a lot of time really, I play it while I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't reach out and grab you melodically the way the the way that Deluxe does. It sounds familiar to me when I put it on, but I don't have I don't have a relationship with it yet. And I do think I'm going to spend some more time on it. But yeah, what you said about Zuckerzeit sounds right on to me. It clearly comes from the same time period, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have Rother producing the other record, right? Now he's playing on this record too, right? It's involved in the composition. I do like Dino a lot. I think that's a great song. They played it at the show last month.
I was going to say, you just heard it live.
Yeah. It kind of straddles the cluster-noid divide a fair bit, right? You've got the motoric beat, but it's the cluster drum machine.
Yeah.
You got guitars, but not a ton of them. I don't know, it has a Stereolab feel to it, and I'm never gonna complain about that. Another one that kind of jumps out to me is Ahoy. It has that, we're just going to go through this saying, this sounds like Noid, this sounds like Cluster, right?
We might.
Yeah. Whereas in other episodes, this sounds like Pink Floyd.
Right.
This sounds like Hendrix. This sounds like, it has a Noise 75 side A feel to it, right? Just a gentility to it. It makes me think of just Michael Rother being a good person.
Yeah. And side A was the Rother side of Noise 75, just for reference.
Yeah. Just appreciating beautiful natural things. And it has a kind of emotional depth to it. Right. Amid the kind of bleeps and blips that we're hearing a lot from Cluster. Yeah, interesting record, but I do feel like I got to put more time and attention to
Yeah,
it.
same.
Right?
I've only listened to it in passing a few times. Like, I'll put it on at work. I think I listened to it on the plane when we were going to Italy, but I just haven't spent that much time, like, really listening to it.
They did do some live shows, right? I mean, this is what Rother was after in the first place, is get somebody on stage with me to play Noi. Well, he got folks on stage with him. They were playing Harmonia instead. There's a YouTube video you can watch, Harmonia Live 1974. This is a gig they recorded on March 23rd, 1974 at Penny Station in Griesheim, Germany. They released a box set in 2015, Harmonia Complete Works. It's got the 2 studio albums on it, and it has a couple of live shows on it. I think this is the 74 live show as well as the one on YouTube.
Yeah, Rother references this show in practically every single interview that asks him about Harmonia. And so he did talk about it kind of in depth in that Red Bull video interview. He also commented on it quite a bit in Future Days, and he said that this is actually the show where he met his future wife, partner, and he's been with that woman for 25 years. He had a quote in there too, just kind of about how they played live. He said, "We played very improvised music. The idea was that one of us would start with an idea, some percussion, a piano pattern, and the rest would join in. We would fade out tracks, but sometimes the fade outs are longer than the tracks because we didn't know how to bring things to a stop. So you hear the people talking more loudly during these fade outs."
That's a Krautrock theme, is not knowing when the track should stop.
Right.
The Tangerine Dream problem, which is like we're running out of room on the record, so we're just going to
we'll just stop.
Snap it off. And have somebody breathe for a while. Yeah.
He talked a bit about the Revox tape, which was a particular type of tape that they used to record, and it was very expensive. So typically they would erase over those tapes so that they could reuse them. But this particular live show they kept, and so Rother refers to it as a, quote, document. And so then David Stubbs went on to say that document is the word, with its strange premature fade-outs as described by Rother, and the slightly fuzzy tones of the lo-fi tape-recorded sound intermingling with the desultory chat of audience members. On Live 1974, you get a vivid sense of both the intimacy between players and audience, and also an element of befuddlement, as Harmonia feel their way through these pieces. It's superb, however, a Krautrock relic of genuine value.
So that has me thinking in 2 different directions. It reminds me of sort of the way Cluster was talking about what they were doing, with, even with Schnitzler back in the day. They would go play these extended live shows at art events, right? Mm-hmm. And there was no set list. There's no, we laid this stuff down on tape and now we're going to render it live for you. No, they're just going to play something. It's sort of like those albums,
what I was going to say.
Right? The Live and Brighton stuff.
Yeah. It's like a mashup of all the songs in one song.
Yeah. I wondered, too, if they were taping these shows because the show is just like any, even if they were noodling around the studio, right? They're equally opportunities to spit out ideas and see where they go. And if you tape what you did in the show and it was good, you might want to take it to the studio and develop it some more. I wonder if that's what they were, if it was more of a utility to them than something they would ever intend to release. But cool that it's out there. Once we've talked a little bit about Deluxe and where Harmonia ultimately headed, we'll talk a little bit more about the various parties' relative tolerance for not planning and not structuring their songs. Yeah. But probably the best planned and most structured work they did was Deluxe, right? So let's hit it. Here's Dieter Moebius talking to Red Bull Music about the Deluxe record.
And you said that this album that we're about to play a track from, which was called, what was it called? It was
Deluxe.
Deluxe.
Deluxe, yeah.
You said this was your attempt at making a commercial record.
Yes, the whole project. Even you can see it on the sleeve. It's all very sophisticated, and we even sang in the record.
All together.
First track.
You say this with a bit of embarrassment almost.
In a way.
So for the first time, you're going in, and I mean, this is kind of a big moment for you guys, trying to make a commercial record.
If it would have been a big commercial success, perhaps I would think different about it. But since it was not, I could say that we should not have done it, perhaps even.
What's your reaction to that, Carlo?
I mean, when I read that, it felt a little contradictory almost to me. I don't know.
It kind of pissed me off because I really like this.
Yeah, like I really like it too. And then I think from everything that we've read, it makes me just think maybe they just didn't really like Rother being in the band. Like they just wanted to be Cluster. Because I think Deluxe is more of a Rother record with Cluster in it versus Musik von Harmonia, which feels more like a Cluster record with Michael Rother on it.
Yeah.
And so maybe ultimately they're just, I don't know. To say that it was an embarrassment feels like it's a little harsh.
Fighting words. I can't tell if he's saying, look, we were trying to sell out, but nobody bought it.
Yeah.
Right? And so why did we sell out?
Yeah.
And I think, well, you made a beautiful record. That's a good reason.
Yeah.
But they just must not see it in the same terms.
Yeah, apparently.
It's too antithetical to what they stood for. I think both of us are glad they did it. And as we dig deeper, we're going to tell you why we feel that way. Dieter, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I don't know. They just feel bitter about it.
Yeah.
It's odd. That's why I feel like it's contradictory. It's like you wanted something that was more commercial, which you did kind of do, but now you're embarrassed by it. So.
Right. Would you be less embarrassed or more embarrassed if everybody loved it?
Yeah.
And that was what you became known for and remembered for. I don't know. Not a bad walk away when Brian Eno says you're the most important band in the world.
Exactly.
So, and wants to climb up on stage with you at concerts.
Right.
Anyway, so as we said before, Deluxe released on Brain Records August 20, 1975, recorded in June 1975 at a Harmonia studio in Forst, mixed in July 1975 at Connie Planck's studio.
The lineup here was Rother on guitars, keyboards, and vocals, Roedelius on keyboards and vocals, Moebius on synthesizer, Nagoja harp. I don't know if I'm saying that properly.
Your guess is as good as mine.
And some vocals.
Yeah.
So then we have a special guest on this record as well, which was Monty Newmeyer from Guru on drums. And he is on specifically Walkie Talkie, Monza, and Gollum. Then it's quoted as music and concept by Rother, Roedelius, and Moebius. Production is Harmonia and Planck, and the engineer here is Connie Planck.
The gear isn't identified on the liner notes. I think we went through this a little bit in the Cluster episode too, trying to reverse engineer what from pictures on the internet, and a lot of people have done some good work trying to figure out what Cluster had in their studio. So we'll just call it the internet. The internet says they had Farfisa organs, the Davoli synth, which is a 2-octave organ with vibrato oscillators, the Farfisa synth orchestra, which we've talked to Sean about.
I think so.
That particular synth. 3-octave keyboard with monophonic and polyphonic actions released in 1975, so brand new. The Elka Drummer 1 that they used on Zuckerzeit, but then they also had live drums in the mix as well. I went just a little bit down the rabbit hole of Farfisa.
You sure did.
And it turns out Farfisa is a contraction of Fabbriche Riunite Fisarmoniche Italiane, meaning United Italian Accordion Factories. So Farfisa organs, the company originally made accordions. From what I can tell, Farfisa organs featured pretty prominently in rock and pop music of the 60s because they were available on the cheap. Italian labor after the war was much cheaper than in the US and UK. So I think we've talked about how it was much easier to pick up a guitar than it was to pick up a Moog.
Yeah.
And if you needed an organ, you went for the Farfisa. So by this time, they were making synths too. So pretty cool.
And there's been a couple of reissues of this record. So Brain reissued it in 2004 and 2015. Now you have a 2015 copy. Is that right, Brad?
I do. Yeah. So I guess this company Groenland, which did the Neu reissues, I think those are 2014. You've got some of those too, I think. Suckers that we are, we bought those and then the box set came out. But I don't know, I think they're pretty great releases. I'm not someone who can sit and listen to 2 different issues of a record and tell you why one's better than the other. But they sound pretty great to me. There are Lilith reissues as well, right, which come with the CD. But the 2 I've happened to come across just in the stores are, Musik von Harmonia and the deluxe one. They're both the Brain versions. I got my copy at Hausfrau Records in Cleveland. We talked about this place in our Tangerine Dream episode. Lots of good stuff there. It's over in Ohio City. I saw Sophie Soso there. I saw a Two-Way Army LP that I passed on and regretted, but eventually got in England. But I found this record there, Deluxe, along with Noi 84, and I bought both of those. I saw the Deluxe in there, so I went to Apple Music and just hit play on the first track. And an experience is very different from Musik von Harmonia. Like, the first 10 seconds of the first track sold me. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to play the living crap out of it. There's a melody there that just jumps right off at you, and it's got this kind of triumphal, I don't know, this very sort of powerful electronic, I don't know, loved it to death from the jump. And so on the strength of that, I bought it. So it turns out I left the store, and then I thought, you know what, I need to go back and buy some more records. Or at least I need to buy the Black Sabbath self-titled that the guy had on the counter. So when I went back, the guy I had taken the copy of Deluxe out of the racks. He had another copy that he was loading into the rack to replace the one that I had bought. He had it in the back. So it might very well still be there, Carla.
I'll be there in 2 weeks.
That was July.
I will report back.
That was July. So, yeah, you never know. But
I've not ever been to that record store either, so that'll be good.
It sounds like the store in Bologna that you liked. It's post-punk, it's krautrock.
My poor mom. I'm going to be like, hey, Mom, take me to this record store in Ohio City. You're going to love it. She's still such a trooper.
So this is my problem, is I find myself in record stores with other people who are being really patient with me.
She did that for me last time I was home when I went to Record Revolution, which unfortunately has closed as we're recording this. It closed a couple of weeks ago now, but she was so patient. She was digging through the stacks. It was very cute.
All right, anyway. I'll cross my fingers for you. Let me know.
I'll report back. So let's talk about the cover art on this one.
Yeah.
It's a letdown. So I think when you come off the strength of Musik von Harmonia with that bright detergent bottle, pop art, Andy Warhol-esque Velvet Underground, kind of one striking image illustration kind of a thing. And now the Deluxe, it has a yacht rock vibe.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Yeah, I mean, that first record, it's like Warhol meets Dinger.
Yeah.
Right? The ad slogan, like the product sale, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really sharp, really, yeah. I gravitated toward that first record whenever I was giving Harmonia a try. And really just, I hate to say it, like I don't want to say I was put off, but like the shiny object grabbed my attention, right? And for so long, longer than I should have, I didn't get into this. And so I saw it on the racks and thought, okay, I'm gonna road test this before I buy it. The back cover, I don't know, it's kind of cute. Has them on the beach. They're all in white. Kind of a La Dusseldorf type.
They really
feel there.
loved white pants and overalls and things during this era.
Yeah. A cute little beach umbrella. But, right, this isn't something you look at and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to love this. right. So Julian Cope said many great things about Deluxe.
Yeah, this is a great quote. He says, Deluxe is a magnificent album that everyone should own. It is melodic in a most melancholic way. Weeping synthesizers and weeping guitars over electric percussion and early polytone keyboards. They were joined on drums by Guru Guru's Mani Neumeyer, who lifted the Harmonia sound far beyond that of the first LP. Deluxe has a tragic magic to it that is reminiscent of epic poems like Longfellow's Hiawatha and the short stories of Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book.
So, we always check in on the Krautrock books. Ulrich Adelt's Krautrock, German music in the 70s. Doesn't give much time or attention to Deluxe, other than to say that they tried harder to be more commercially accessible and it didn't really work out for them.
Yeah, in future days, David Stubbs says, by comparison with the first album, Deluxe feels just a little too light, lacking the gravitational pull of Moebius and Roedelius' influence. They feel like guests on what is more of a Michael Rother album, a fine one for sure, but as Moebius today admits, the hearts of the cluster duo were in it less and less. This led to two subsequent quotes, this one from Moebius, who says, and we kind of echoed this in an earlier quote, but this said, of course, Harmonia was an attempt to be commercial, but in the end, Joachim and I weren't very happy with it. The first Harmonia album has a lot of the feel of Cluster, the way we play it, but the second album is more Michael Rother, and so we stopped with that and went back to Cluster. We were happy not to rehearse anymore. They're so harsh about it.
You get the feeling that they're very dogmatic about it must be strange, it must be improvised, improvisatory.
Whatever that word was that I still don't know how to pronounce.
Right. And that the structures that Michael was imposing on them were exactly that. They were impositions.
So they just weren't very collaborative. It's like they wanted to be collaborative, but then in the end they're like, well, it doesn't sound like Cluster. So,
Rother, on the other hand, says in future days, it could be really beautiful. If we look back at the development of Harmonia between 1973 and summer 1976, we improvised entirely without structure. Okay, so he's feeling like he gave, right, played it their way.
Right.
At the time, Roedelius and Moebius weren't so interested in my idea of having more structure because we had these great problems when we played live. Later, we changed hats. Roedelius nowadays is more into the 1975 stuff, not the earlier 1974 stuff. Okay, so there may be a division between Moebius, who we've heard from twice now, deprecating Deluxe, and Roedelius, who may bring a different attitude about it. And I think, as I look back on Zuckerzeit, the Roedelius tracks felt poppier to me.
Yeah, I think we did make that comment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm still on the poppy side with Krautrock.
Same. Yeah.
There's a lot of cool aggro testing us kind of stuff that I can embrace, but it's got to have something to keep me on the tracks. Yeah. So All Music gives Deluxe 4.5 stars. Both Harmonia LPs get 4.5. Like La Dusseldorf before them, All Music describes the album as a touch more immediate and song-oriented than its predecessor. I'd say more than a touch, but no less enchanting and lovely to hear. The various vocals really do fit the music in a lovely way, and it's a little surprised that Brian Eno might have felt even more of an affinity with the group than before, being non-musical but still affecting, like mysterious chants or barks. The motoric pulses and rhythms, however soft and subtle, still dominate the proceedings, while the glazed, warm feeling of the whole album is astounding. That sounds right to me. I quibble about the 4.5 instead of 5.
Yeah, agreed.
Just a 5-star album for me.
It would be a 5-star.
Am I being too liberal a grader?
I mean, I don't know. It would be a 5-star album for me, too.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying listening to it basically on repeat since you picked it back in, I don't know, September. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, every episode we reference our friend Yorkshire Ned, so we checked in on Yorkshire Ned for Deluxe, and actually it wasn't Yorkshire Ned who wrote this review. It was a guest reviewer, Andrew Garibaldi, on Ned's website.
wasisdas.co.uk.
Andrew Garibaldi says the first 3 tracks could have easily been off any of the first 3 Michael Rother albums, for it is that influence that predominates the electronics and keys from the cluster musicians, more forming the icing on the cake or the backdrop to some of the most stunning and gorgeous, powerful and dynamic, languid and cohesive electric guitar work from Rother over the trademark metronomic can-like rhythmic bass in nearly 30 minutes of pure bliss no matter how many times you play them. The last 3 tracks have more of a Zuckerzeit feel to them, as the cluster guys take center stage with swirling organ, electronic drums, deep bass, and lush strings on Notre Dame, a more La Dusseldorf sounding Gollum, and ending with the near 6 minutes of Kexi, a sedate closer with undulating electro-percussive beats, swirling electronics, slowly flowing melodies, and the sounds of birds over a coda of lush acoustic guitar. It's a pretty good review.
Yeah, some time and attention, right? Real descriptive terms. And the word autumnal doesn't appear once. Pitchfork says, if Music Phone Harmonia mapped the range of everything Harmonia would ever do, 1975's Deluxe used a more limited palette to paint a more beautiful picture. That's a pretty good summation, I think, too. Deluxe gets a 9.0 rating from Pitchfork, which goes on to say, even when adding new wrinkles, Harmonia sound tremendously self-assured and comfortable in their sound. And their integration of something approaching proper songcraft, love that, something approaching,
not quite there, but
not necessarily
sort
achieved.
of.
Right. Their integration of something approaching proper songcraft intersected quite closely with experiments being done some distance away by the former keyboardist of Roxy Music, a young man who became enamored of Harmonia named Brian Eno.
Mojo magazine says, of all the music Rother made with clusters Dieter Moebius and Hans-Joachim Roedelius at their country retreat in Forst between 1973 and 1976, this is the most fully realized, the guitar's elegant song structures leading a trance-like form and direction to the cluster duo's electronic explorations. And then it goes on to credit Autobahn as an inspiration.
Yeah, it sounds like the interviewer talked Rother into saying, yeah, you know what, probably hearing Florian and Ralph singing Fahren, Fahren, Fahren on the Autobahn gave us the courage to put vocals on this track. Kind of funny. All right, so let's do the track by track.
Let's do it. It's time.
1 hour, 23 minutes. And counting. Side A, track 1, Deluxe, Immer wieder. Just a quick side note here. If you go to Apple Music and if you go to Spotify, the subtitle for the track says Immer weiter, which is always farther away. And that's not what I was hearing in the song. Like I was like, okay, I remember at least enough German to know the difference between Immer weiter and Immer wieder. And there's actually saying Immer wieder, and on the record, it's spelled correctly. 500,000 hits on Spotify for this song.
It's so strange it's spelled wrong. It must be something weird in the metadata, because that's what populates, like, that the label would have given them. I don't know. It's too late in the evening to be talking about metadata. There you go.
Anyway.
I love this song. It's the most beautiful...
gorgeous.
...composition. I was on the plane, like, intently listening to this, and that's where some of these notes came from, and I kind of laughed when I read that I hadn't looked at these notes in a hot minute.
I love these notes.
and I wrote, I feel wrapped up in a warm Mo-Ro Rother blanket as we take off on some kind of journey. Taking off in the plane.
It's like that wash.
Yes.
That, yeah.
Just wonderful.
It's just a warming melody.
Yeah.
The drums kind of bubble underneath. This is definitely the drummer one, right? This is not Manny playing drums. And it almost sounds like they're underwater. I don't know what they did to kind of muffle that sound, right?
That's true. It does sound like that.
It feels like it's struggling, like it's under the blanket too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the synths are just so...
The synth mix is
enveloping.
amazing in this song. And then the way the guitars wash in and out, it's just really is a moving piece.
The fit here, the complementarity is maybe strongest here. I mean, there are other tracks where we could maybe say the same, but there are also others on here where you're like, oh, there's the little bits and pieces that Roedelius and Moebius are throwing in on top of the Rother track, right? This feels like a 50-50.
This one does.
For me.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Like we said, you had this wonderful wash of the guitars, but then you also have, like, I call them the outer space pieces. They kind of like zig and zag in
Laser
and
beams.
out, and that is like so cluster to me, just to have these random sounds that pop in. But it works.
So this is going to sound ridiculous and morbid, but like there are songs that when I hear them, I think, okay, when I'm like old and dying and lying in my bed and incapable of anything, I just want people to play these songs for me so I can remember why I loved life. Sugar Cube's Birthday, right? I'm the Resurrection by the Stone Roses. I would put this song on my As I Lay Dying playlist, like just of the beautiful tracks. There'd be a fair amount of Noi on there too, but it's comforting and powerful. It serves the purpose.
Yeah.
lyrics aren't that ultra sophisticated. It's over and over again, up and down, now up and now down. That's the translation. And it's chanted over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to say the words over and over again, over and over again. It's cryptic, right? Doesn't tell you what it's describing. Maybe it's just about life generally, right? The ups and downs, the fortune's wheel, whatever you want to say. Time's a flat circle. Very different from what Klaus Dinger is going to give us, right? Like a political manifesto.
Yes.
And so you kind of feel, all right, these are the two sensibilities that maybe were in the room at that time, right? Klaus, and then Michael there saying, all right, everything's measured. The ups come down, the downs go up. Klaus, settle.
Yeah.
Right? Take a breath. But yeah, I don't derive a whole lot of pleasure or insight from the lyrics other than it sounds like wise men, you know?
And I think also it's almost like, so when you don't know what the translation is, so you're just hearing the words, not knowing what those words mean, it's almost just like part of the instrumentation in a way, because it's more chanting, like you said, right? So it's almost like that is almost like a motoric piece of itself, where it's just that same kind of chanting over and over and over again, and everything else is layered on top of that. When you don't know what the words mean, that's, to me, it was just like almost using that vocal like another layer of instruments that were part of it.
The repetition is very important. Sometimes I get worked into a corner trying to tell these Mixtape Diary guys why they should like Krautrock and what I like so much about it. And then I hear myself saying, no, it's great. There are like 13-minute songs that just repeat and repeat and repeat. And they're like, yeah.
We know.
And I should like that. Why? And I'm like, it's the variation. It's what they do within the repetition. And they're like, yep, you know what? It could be 3 minutes long and I'd be perfect, right?
Yeah.
We had this discussion live with them. Yep. But it is the repetition and the variation and the layering and the production. Yeah, can't beat it. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Secret Machines cover.
It's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Really powerful stuff. I feel like I need to listen to that band a bit more.
Yeah, I wasn't really familiar with them.
Yeah, it has like an explosions in the sky kind of feel to it. I think they're from Texas.
Oh.
I think that's right. The blurb for the Rother show in London said that he had collaborated with them. I don't have any more detail than that. You know, we talked before about Rother's 13 favorite albums. According to the Quietus, he named their first LP, Now Here's Nowhere, as one of his 13 favorites. You can feel the affinity here. It's a faithful cover. We'll play a clip of it in a minute, but it's different enough. It's a 21st century version, right? The 21st century guitars.
It's really great.
It really works. Don't make me choose. I'm not going to choose. I'm just going to have them both.
You're allowed to have both. It's fine.
Yeah. Walkie-talkie. This is emphatically something that, I don't know. It seems like only these three people could have done together. I feel like Cluster did a lot of work here, right? We have this really interesting blend of the synths that kind of have this chopsticky, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of tinkly thing going. Manny Neumeyer's involved, so you have these toms kind of churning and they swell, they go soft, they go loud, they go soft, they go loud. And then we've got like a slide guitar over top. I'd be interested to know like what they were doing that led them here.
Yeah.
Jamming and exploration that because these ingredients are so disparate and strange.
Yeah, this was the one to me where I thought that Rother's more like Middle Eastern influences really kind of shined on this one, because it's that the beginning, the guitar in the very beginning in particular, like when this song kicks off, is what really I was like, oh, this is very Michael Rother. Like it just really hit me. Then there's like this bass line that keeps that song intact, right, as it keeps going with the guitars and the synths dancing around it. But this was the track in particular that to me seemed to have a little bit of a more Middle Eastern influence just in the guitar work compared to some of the other things.
Now that you say that, I think I'm going to retract whatever it was that I said. I was like, I don't hear any Middle Eastern influence. No, you're right. It's definitely here. This is exotic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of taking these very new and modern instruments and creating a kind of antique,
like sound
ancient,
with them,
enduring sound. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool.
This song has good stereo effects. It's a good headphone listen.
I feel like with Cluster, there's the general music, right? The general synth layers, the stuff that's in the forefront, and then they just have these little seasonings that they throw in. These little squinchy, slurpy sounds.
Yeah, I said transistor radio. I'm like, is there a transistor radio in the background?
Yeah. You don't hear anybody else doing stuff like this.
Mm-mm.
And they sprinkle this stuff in, and you might think it's gimmicky, because they're just little bleeps and blips and just kind of goofy overlays that are just dropped in.
I think it's what keeps it interesting, because sometimes you don't notice all of that on the first couple listens. Like, I keep hearing different tones and sounds. The more I listen to it, I feel like I hear something else.
Yeah. You want to listen to it more to tap into what you missed the last time. There's just so much happening, and you want to hear it all together, and you want to hear it all separated. You want to, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Julian Cope comments on the drums here. I think this is interesting. Had Jackie Liebezeit, right, from Can, what did he say? You must play monotonously, right?
Yeah.
Had Jackie Liebezeit played the part, he would have rendered it as Neu would have played it. See the earlier Rother albums as proof. But Manny Neumeyer renders the beat far more into a horse ride than a drive, and he keeps the organicness of the track intact over its 10 minutes.
Yeah, I thought this was a great point. I would have not thought about it until really reading that, but the drums are like a little bit secondary here. They're keeping the pace of the song and keeping everything intact, but Klaus or Jackie would have really amped up the drum scenario here.
The Neumeyer drums, like, I always thought what's interesting about Dinger's drum play is that it's almost mechanical. And this is true of Jackie too.
Yeah.
Different with Dinger, it's almost mechanical in that it's the straight ahead, same beat every time. But there are just enough fills and flashes. And in some instances, he drops off the beat just enough to kind of remind you, I'm a person playing this, right? Maybe doubly true of Jackie, right? Which is that in a time before drum machines, he sounded like a drum machine.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point. Manny here is like, he's bringing up the volume, he's taking it away, he's on the toms. The word organic jumps out from that quote to me, right? It sounds more like there's a person involved. And okay. So for the first time, we're hearing a person laying a beat behind what Cluster does. And that's cool. But there was that quote where Rother says, my two favorite drummers are Jackie and Klaus.
Yeah.
So sorry, Manny. Bronze medal for you.
All right, Monza.
Yeah. So this is a reprise of Immer wieder, right? Same lyrics. letting drop the kind of majesty and weightiness of Deluxe, this is just kind of a rock and roll number, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is Neu. So this puts completely to rest my initial read of Neu, which was that Rother brought the beauty and Dinger brought the rock, right? And Julian Cope gets right into this in Krautrock Sampler. Here's what he says. One song on Deluxe stands out to utterly confound my belief that Klaus Dinger was the driving force of Neu. The song is Monza, and it preempted the clatter beats of La Dusseldorf by some months. Was this a combative stance on the part of Michael Rother? He knew full well that the La Dusseldorf LP was going to sound the same way. Perhaps it was the fallout of a truly symbiotic relationship. That's kind of a conspiracy theory. That's kind of a, I'm going to get there first.
Yeah.
Right? I think my read was that maybe he was as committed to this sound, to this innovative sound, as Dinger was. So if you listen to a track like Super, maybe there's more Michael Rother in that than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Because here it is.
Yeah, I like this song. I mean, it's like a rock song. I like how it starts out, just these guitars. And it's not very noodly, considering that it is largely an improvisational song, right? That they're just kind of jamming, but not like in a jam band 70s way.
Proggy, unacceptable
not in that
way.
proggy, yeah.
Neumeier brings, and this is where I was going before, and it's very evident here, he's throwing all kinds of interesting fills, more expansive, right? Fills here, more expansive improvisations. But it's motoric at its core.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be insufferable linguist here. I wrote this note months ago and I just saw it again and I'm like, oh God, do I really want to say this? I may be going fishing here, but Google tells me that the German word Meier means steward of an estate. This drummer's name is Neumeier. And if the estate is Neu, then hasn't Neumeier, by standing in for Dinger here, acted as the steward of Neu?
There you go. And scene.
Thank you. This has been
See you
Carl
next
and Brian
time.
talking
This
about
episode is
Krautrock. Yeah. Oh, put a stop to me. It's getting late.
Mm-hmm. It's almost the next morning for you. So.
Yeah. Another quote from Julian Cope here. It is disturbing to hear Monza the same way as Neu's Hero or La Dusseldorf's La Dusseldorf is disturbing. It's just too goddamn early. Goes on to say, Monza presents step 2 of the punk road from Neu 75's Hero and After 8. Words cannot describe this.
I think I was confused by that. I was like, what is he saying? Now I get it, but...
One of my earliest memories of krautrocking with you, Carla, was I was in my car at one point and you sent a text. I think you were listening to For Immer or something and you were like, I can't believe this is 1973.
Yeah.
Or Lila Engel or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Lila Engel.
2 years later, still can't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fun one. Okay, I don't know how to say it. Is it Notre Dame? We Americans would say Notre Dame,
but I don't know. I think I just said it in the way I figured only we say Notre Dame.
I think that's right. We're going to assume that they're not football fans, and we're going to say Notre Dame. It just sounds weird coming out of my mouth.
I know. It sounds like we're trying to be pretentious, but...
Right.
I think this is the most cluster of all the songs. I actually really love this song a lot. But to me, it feels the most clustery of all the songs on this record.
You almost wonder if the Catholic priest should have showed up again and said, I got some lyrics. This would be perfect, right?
Exactly.
You've got these Gothic organs. You've got this ambient section, right? Contemplative.
Yeah.
Let's put the Bible verses in.
Right. I did make a note that I felt like the drum machine that kind of starts this off almost feels like a precursor to like the 80s synth pop that's coming. Like it had a real 80s synth pop vibe to me.
So on that score, right, like this kind of scramble of the organs that's happening. I was like, where have I heard something like that before? And bringing it back again to OMD, there's a song on the Junk Culture album, right? The one I just got on LP, Never Turn Away, which I've been listening to for years. And at the end of it, it does something similar with that kind of organ sound. And it's borderline manic, but beautiful, you know? It wouldn't surprise me if they had Harmonia on their record players growing up. We know they had the Kraftwerk and the Neu. Yeah, very cool composition. The more I hear this song, the better it gets.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. It's probably my favorite.
Yeah. What do you think about Gollum? Next track.
You know, it's honestly not my favorite. It reminds me of, like, it could very easily be on, like, Zuckerzeit. This one felt like that to me.
Yeah.
And maybe because there's, like, a similar synth tone in there or something, but the buildup of the layers and the textures is interesting, but it just didn't really... This one is still, as many times as I listen to it, it's not really grabbing me.
Yeah, I wonder if this is what gets you to 4.5. Is this just doesn't, right? It doesn't stand out the same way. It doesn't hold the line like the others do.
Yeah.
The Zuckerzeit stuff, I'm cool with. It takes a while to get to it. That second half, it kind of kicks in, and I'm like, all right, we got our, right, as you were saying, marzipan, right?
Yeah.
We got that kind of swell in here. The first part reminded me of, those tracks on side B of Autobahn that either one of us could have taken or left, right? Like Comet and Melody 1. Like those other tracks that are in between that we think are gorgeous and perfect. But like it's interesting. It's maybe a little more spacey. It doesn't reach out and grab me in the same way as the others did. Contrast, Kexa, loved this. This is just a perfect. This is the Morgan Spatzier gong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they love to pay homage to their like nature and like these like pastoral roots. There's these like synth bird and river noises and things like that. And again, like we said, it's a common theme. It's just beautiful though.
Just the gorgeous melody. It's got that underwater drum thing again from takes you back to the first track. All that synthesized, that electrified nature that we talk about in Roedelius on Zuckerzeit.
Yeah.
Morgan Spatzier gong. They could have gone out like Klaus Stinger did and just recorded birds, right? And they're like, nah, we're going to make our birds with oscillators.
Make some bird sounds.
Right. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It seems like Michael Rother likes to take us to the water's edge in so many of his songs. For Immer does it, 11, 12, 13 minutes of driving, and at the end it's water.
Yeah.
Leibvol on Neu 75, similar thing. You had read a quote from him earlier. Here he is on the BBC Krautrock documentary talking about water and music.
I always lived near water. I lived near water in Hamburg, where I was born. In Munich, right next to the river, Isar. In Winslow, on the Bollin, River Bollin. And in Pakistan at the seaside, and Düsseldorf at the Rhine. And I feel very comfortable in water, with water, and it has an effect. I can't really explain it. It's like time. It's something that has to do with time, with passage of time. And in a way, it's also a picture like of music, moving along.
It's not empty water either, right? It's this lively space, on this track at least, with the birds and the crickets.
Yeah, it's another beautiful track.
And that little waltzy thing at the end.
Yeah.
That little lullaby type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All hail Deluxe.
It's great. I love it. I need it on vinyl.
I'm hoping it's at Hausfrau.
Me too.
Quickly, before we eat up too much more time, what happened afterwards? Moebius and Roedelius told Red Bull Music after Deluxe it was over. Roedelius says, yeah, we didn't want to rehearse. Here's Moebius expanding on that point.
We go in the studio, and in 3 days nowadays we finish one whole CD. So we are very fast, and we play with our mistakes. We think the mistakes are really great mistakes. So we don't have to repeat.
And Michael Rother didn't take the same approach.
Oh, no,
No.
at all, at all.
So you guys parted ways.
Yeah, we didn't want to rehearse. We didn't want to play always the same tracks. Impossible for us.
And so you can see, right? It just was, the center wasn't going to hold.
Harmonia really opened the door to subsequent collaborations. So there was Cluster and Eno, and then there was Eno, Moebius, and Roedelius, those collaborations. Roedelius told Psychedelic Baby that Eno just showed up at a Harmonia show in 1974 and jammed with the band. And did they invite him on stage? Like, how did that really work?
Yeah. Rother's side of the story is that Eno was in Bremen talking to a journalist about how much he liked the Krautrock bands. And the journalist said, hey, Harmonia is playing tonight in Hamburg. I don't know how far away Bremen is from Hamburg, but they got there. And he parked himself in the front row. And so here's a clip from Dieter Moebius telling Red Bull about how all this kind of came to pass.
Oh, so we had a show in Hamburg, a Harmonia show. And Brian Eno happened to be in town, and he came to the show, and he talked to us in the pause, in the middle of the show, and then he asked us to join us for the second half. And we were thinking, oh, wow, does this guy have to come on stage with us? Of course, we said, okay, and we played with us.
I guess this fits again, right, with the notion that none of this was rehearsed. So it wasn't as though they had some plan that was disrupting. It was, come on up, right? You can make some shit up right alongside us.
Then from there, they invited Eno to Forst, in contrast to Rother, who just came to them. But Eno didn't go to them for like 2 years. I mean, they invited him, but he didn't make his way to Forst for a couple of years.
Yeah, so we're seeing the hierarchy here, right? Like, Rother came crawling to us. We invited Eno, and Eno was like, well, I'll get there when I get there.
Right.
So when he finally did get to Forst in 76, he stayed for 11, 12 days. Those sessions would not be released until the 1990s. They were issued as Harmonia and Eno Tracks and Traces, although I think at this point in time, Rother was probably not with the group anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Interesting that they'd be released under that banner. But in any case, after that, Sophie So-So, 1976.
Yeah, then we have Cluster and Eno in 77, which was recorded in Connie Plank's studio and with Holger Zuke on bass. This is a great album. I spent some time listening to this not too long ago.
I still haven't.
And I do want to buy it.
Does it work like this in America where just, yeah, we'll get Holger Zuke to come in and play bass. We'll get Manny Neumeyer to play the drums.
Yeah. I
like
think it does work like that everywhere.
Yeah.
It happens here in Nashville a lot. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it probably happens everywhere, but I know that it does happen here. And maybe because it is kind of a smaller community here. And so people guest on other people's records like all the time.
It makes perfect sense. And people are excited to work with each other. And so they should and they would, right? It's just the names kind of recur here in a way that maybe just is much more noticeable to you when you've done 12 podcast episodes.
Exactly.
So a subsequent record after The Heat came out of those same sessions as Cluster and Eno. That one was credited to Eno, Roedelius, Moebius. Again, like they're pretty attentive to like the Cluster brand, right? And what it attaches to, what it doesn't. And I wonder if maybe they thought, yeah, we probably should have in the first place called that first record Eno, Roedelius, Moebius.
Yeah.
I don't know. Having not listened to the two albums, maybe one is sufficiently distinct from the other that they thought it merited the different name. I don't know. They tell us lawyers not to speculate, so maybe I shouldn't. So to this day, I think Michael Rother still lives in Forst. In the Mojo interview he gave in 2016, he talks about his living with his cats in Forst, like the quiet life. I sent you that image earlier today that I took. So I just did a Google search of Michael Rother in Forst, and there's like a business listing in Google that says Michael Rother Komponier, Michael Rother composer, as though he's available for hire. There's a phone number. It says that he's not in business anymore. So if we were to call him and ask him to do an intro and outro for us, would he pick up?
Oh no, let's do it now. No, just kidding. Surprise.
5 a.m. Right. You're live on a podcast. I can't think of a better way to get a consequential guest than to like spring that shit on him by getting their phone number. I love it when a plan comes together. Carla, is this Prague?
No.
Next question. Is this Neu with cluster elements?
Yes.
Is this cluster with Neu elements?
Yes.
Is this something altogether new and different? Sometimes.
I mean, sometimes, yeah. Right?
I think that's right. When it is, it's the best.
Yeah, it's like taking the best elements of both of those bands and mashing them together.
Yeah. I feel like if you can really specifically say, this sounds like X Neu song or Y cluster song, that's when they're not as good. Or we can hear the parts and be like, oh yeah, that could have been on Zuckerzeit.
Yeah.
It's when it's blended well, it's perfect.
Yeah, like Deluxe.
Yep.
The song.
So one other just sort of odds and ends. There is a book called The Autobiography of Hans-Joachim Roedelius that we would love to read, but just you try and find it.
Why are all these things out of stock? Don't they know about on-demand printing?
Right.
Well, just buy it and then you make it.
Or if you're not going to sell it anymore, at least put it on the internet for people to read. You know, the La Dusseldorf episode, it was that documentary, The Heart is a Drum, where the best you can do is conjure up Swedish error messages telling you why you can go fuck yourself if you thought you were going to watch The Heart is a Drum. I'd love to read that autobiography. Who knows? Maybe the new year will bring us the access that we didn't have before. So we are pushing past 2 hours.
We are.
I love me some Harmonia.
This was a great choice. I didn't listen to it prior to you picking it, so this was a great choice. I really love this record.
I'm interested to do a deeper dive into some of the live stuff, the cluster and Eno, give more love and attention to Musik von Harmonia. But I fully expect I'm going to come back to this over and over again.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I'm going to put Kexa on as I go to sleep tonight. Because why wouldn't you?
Right.
Because I want the best dreams.
Right.
So before we go, what's next? Your choice.
I think we're going to go back into more like psychedelic. We haven't done that for a while. And we're going to go with Guru Guru's Hinton.
Nice.
I've been kind of digging it.
Very, very cool. When you sent that text, I gave it a few minutes, but I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. there was a copy of it in Newberry Comics.
Oh, really?
And I don't know. I feel like we spent too much time talking about the ones that got away.
Yeah.
But I was convinced. I was like, I can come back here anytime, and that record's going to be in the store.
Probably.
It's gone.
Oh, it's gone.
I missed my chance. Yeah. So it'll be streaming for me as we prep for that next episode.
Yeah. I thought we've been in like electronic land for like a while. Let's go back into some psych rock.
Yeah, let's tear it up. I'm totally up for that.
Cool.
All right. Well, in the meantime,
I'm Carla.
I'm Brad. We just talked about Krautrock.